I first started at a small ticketing startup about 10 years ago. At that time, myself and my founding partner were somewhat poached to head over to Morgan & Morgan, which is the largest personal injury law firm in the US, to head up their digital advertising and engineering teams. And while we were there, we saw how much money was being allocated into legal, how bad most firms are at creating differentiated brands and marketing campaigns in legal. So we started Mean Pug.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today I'm joined by Bobby Steinbach, founder of Mean Pug Digital and former engineering lead at Morgan & Morgan, who builds standout law firm brands with full funnel SEO, creative and performance campaigns that actually move the needle, not just the dashboards. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
You mentioned you had a pug. Your business is called Mean Pug. I'm sure there's a story behind that, but broadly, a background, but you got to tell me if that's also why you're called Mean Pug.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I'll give you kind of like the cookie cutter, my background, and then I promise I'll tail end it with why we're Mean Pug.
Okay.
So I first started at a small ticketing startup, think like StubHub, but smaller, in the city about 10 years ago now. I ended up being the first engineer there. We grew that to around 30 folks and about 10 mil ARR before an exit. At that time, myself and my founding partner, Andrew, so he was the first paid digital guy at the ticketing startup, was called Ruckus. We were kind of like somewhat poached to head over to Morgan & Morgan, which is the largest personal injury law firm in the US, to head up their digital advertising and engineering teams. So I was director of engineering over there. Andrew was director of paid digital advertising. And while we were there, we just saw a couple of things. We saw how much money was being allocated into legal. And we saw, in our mind, how bad most firms are at creating differentiated brands and marketing campaigns in legal. So to us, being marketers and entrepreneurs, that really is like perfect storm. Like it's just unintelligent capital, right? So we started Mean Pug about 6 years ago now, 6 years in February, to basically chop away at that problem. How can we help firms build differentiated brands that stand out in a hyper-competitive market? Now, why Mean Pug? I have this like weird, long, deep connection to pugs, and my mom had a pug growing up named Bagel 1. Shortly after Bagel 1, they ended up having another pug, which they named Bagel 2. And then I worked at a startup. At that startup, there was another pug named Toggle. I just always felt kind of connected to these pugs. And then finally, when I moved to the city, to New York City, I ended up getting my own pug named Tiki. Now, Andrew and I, when we started the company, we went through that process that I think anybody who's ever tried to build a business can relate to, where how can we find that perfect mix of name that is memorable, short, easy to spell, and available? It's not taken. Well, we were probably on day 2 or 3 of this. And at some point, we were just like, who do we like the branding of? We ended up really liking MailChimp's branding and kind of how they positioned themselves as a fun brand that had kind of cool iconography and imagery and messaging. So we started thinking along that vein. From there, I thought about pugs kind of naturally. And to be honest, the mean part was just like, what is the last thing you think about when you think about a pug?
Right.
And it was mean. So
Okay.
Mean Pug, that's the lineage.
Love it. That's such a cool story. Do you ever get any sort of confused faces when you're dealing with legal professionals and having meetings with regards to the name?
Absolutely. We get, it's always one of two things. It's always, that's like the worst name I've ever heard for a brand operating in legal, or that's the best, like most brilliant name I've ever heard for a brand operating. In either case, it always reinforces that we made the right decision to me, because you remember us either on one extreme or the other.
I was just going to say, it's a complete differential, isn't it? Especially if if they're going to, entertain pitches from multiple companies, they're all probably going to sound like legal
Law
marketing.
X, law
Yeah.
something. Yep.
Mean Pug is definitely, even if they didn't like you, like they'll definitely remember you, which is better than like not being remembered at all.
Correct. That's my thinking too.
Okay. That's also, and great story as well to have just been sort of right place, right time, and to see that like wonderful opportunity with money being spent in a way that wasn't giving them the sort of ROI that you thought they should be getting. So now we're in the very tail end of 2025. What do you think the state of legal marketing looks like now in terms of where we're at and sort of where we've come from over the past couple of years?
So there's like a couple of parts to that. I think AI has messed with everybody's plans. So legal is no exception. AI has certainly come in and absolutely obliterated CTR on the SERP. It's changed the way people interact with brands. So that's been one enormous change on the legal side. I'd say there's kind of this, I think we might get into this a little bit more later, so I won't go super deep, but there is this continued trend of outside capital coming into legal. And when outside money comes in, it changes the dynamics of what folks are looking for on the ROI side, what types of marketing open up to them. So traditional media, out of home, these are channels which everyone kind of thought was dying. But when you've got a budget and you've got to allocate it, in many ways, there's no better spend than getting economies of scale on the out-of-home side or doing any other form of like traditional media advertising. We're seeing a lot of that in 2025 as well.
Okay. Are you guys providing any of that traditional
we do
media?
Yeah. We help firms with both the creative side as well as placing buys. We can also help out on the trafficking side, making sure that spots are getting played as they should be.
Okay, cool. And our firm seeing, and because it's a lot more difficult to measure the ROI on that traditional marketing, isn't it? Than digital is just so easy to track and see. So is that something which you it's got better with tracking? I know we had a guy on who's from Appeasy, which is like one of the biggest North American like traditional flyer distribution services, and they've got like this great tracking system. So I know it can be done. I'm interested to see what you've seen.
Yeah, there is a ton of money floating around in the marketing mix attribution side of things. That's no exception here. That being said, we haven't onboarded those tools because we tried one of those very expensive tools when we were at Morgan, and it was not successful. Like having insider knowledge of when the buys were playing and the spot logs, we knew that it wasn't accurate. So I'm pretty wary of a lot of those tools. A lot of what we do on that side of things tends to be qualitative. There maybe is some level of analysis that we can perform where we can look at lift, brand lift, and stuff like that. But in general, we are looking for qualitative lift in cases.
Okay, cool. Let's just touch on PPC then, if we can, for a minute. Can you break down that sort of bimodal spend pattern between the giants, the mid-market firms, and then the small guys that are just sort of like desperate for cases?
Yeah. So I don't think this is a new phenomena. However, I think it's kind of become accentuated over the past couple of years as PPCs become more of a bloodbath. So basically it comes down to this. You've got, at a high level, 3 categories of firm size. You've got small firms, which I'll lump solos into, mid-sized firms, and large firms. Each has their own difficulties when it comes to budgeting and where you're going to spend marketing dollars. When you're a big firm, one of the problems you're going to face is, how do I allocate my budget, right? Basically, how do I spend the money? Obviously, you don't want to waste it. You can't just burn money, but you also just can't, you're not going to be able to dump $20 million a year into LSA, most likely. You need PPC as a channel, which is why we're seeing, on the one end, big firms allocating more and more dollars into PPC. Small firms, you've got the flip side of that problem where you need cases in the door today. You don't have a budget, but you also can't wait around for SEO to take effect. So yes, we will always recommend people invest in their brand and SEO because you don't want to put all your chips in the PPC basket, but you also need to spend on PPC so that you're getting cases in the door today.
Mm-hmm.
So on the flip side, we're seeing that increase on the other side of the graph there. Mid-sized firms is where we've seen a pullback on the PPC side. So for mid-sized firms, they are turned off by the returns they get on dollars spent, and they don't have such a budget where they need to allocate the money. They can be more selective with where they place their buys. So they can look to overperforming channels that don't necessarily get the volume, like LSA, like to some degree, organic and local. Local SEO tends to be outperforming for firms that aren't multi-state players. So that's really what we're seeing on that side.
Okay. And with the smaller size firms, then do you ever get pushback when you sort of mention SEO? I imagine the smaller firms maybe haven't got an organic Google organic presence. So like you said, they need cases through the door. They want results straight away. And when you tell them like this is like a 6 month to 12 months strategy, they're like, well, like, are you having to educate those smaller firms that it's worth allocating some budget to that for down the line? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always approach that conversation the same way. I try to create the analogy to something that people are usually more familiar with, which is your investments. You wouldn't just put all of your investment into high risk stocks. You'd also probably not put all of your investment into the money market. You probably will have some mix that reflects short-term, mid-term, long-term time horizons, low, high risk, right? So kind of the same thing for your strategy when it comes to marketing. You need channels that address that short-term time horizon, 0 to 3 months. That's your PPC. You need channels that address that long-term time horizon. That's 12 plus months. That's going to be brand and SEO. And then I don't know if I haven't heard other agencies talk about the midterm bucket. We do have a solution for what we'd call like that midterm bucket where it's seeing returns in 6 to 12 months. And for us, that's typically helping firms build relationships with other law firms that are complementary to their practice. So
Okay.
essentially creating referral networks at scale. And we have a solution for that. But that is what we kind of use to address that midterm bucket.
Okay. I love that. I want to dive into that. Just before we do, what do you say to the lawyers that have maybe stepped into the cesspool that is Twitter and they say, Bill, Bobby, isn't SEO dead? I've heard that like it doesn't work anymore. Like, why are we spending money on that? Like, does that happen? What do you say to that?
I've heard marketers say SEO is dead more than I've heard firms say it. Like, I don't think if clients are saying it, it's because they're parroting marketers, which is kind of insidious. I don't really understand why everyone keeps saying it because we know it's not true. And I mean, answer engines make up 1% of search volume at this point. That probably is outsized depending on sector. So like, I think for things like service-based businesses, it probably is higher than 1% of global searches, but it's still a tiny percentage. So I don't know how you can make the claim that SEO is dead. And second, where do you think those answer engines are pulling their results from? It's from the folks who are doing well on the search side. So it's pretty, I think, easy to punch a hole in that theory.
Yeah. Agreed. And for those that do say it's dead and want to step out of the race, that's fine because it's just
go
more.
for it.
Yeah. You mentioned you have a strategy for developing, building, maintaining referral networks. We, as an agency, love referrals, but we've always found it's a very hard thing to sort of systematize. Albeit it is great for us. Like we've got a network of like sort of partner agencies that we do work with, and that has been organic, but it is something that I would love to be able to sort of say, like you can with ad spend, let's double this to try and get double the results. We've never been able to sort of master that. So if you've got any strategy that you can share with the network referral building, that'd be great.
I think it's a little bit different for legal services than it is for our business. And the reason it might not be for your business because you're not industry specific, so you're able to service more clientele. For us, it wouldn't work as well because we just don't have as much top of funnel traffic or intent. Like it makes sense for lawyers because to most people, a lawyer's a lawyer. So whether they have an immigration problem or they have a personal injury matter or criminal defense, they're going to go to their cousin or their cousin's cousin who's a lawyer and say, hey, I have this problem. Can you help me? Law is extremely diverse, and there's not much bleed between practice areas. If you're an immigration attorney, you're probably not helping this person with a personal injury matter. So firms need to have relationships with other firms where they can fill those gaps in practice, right? So that's where the referral network building comes into play. And it's especially powerful because there are so many firms, most of which are solos, that don't have the time or the means to create these networks at scale.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I don't think that's the same for us is because there's something like, what was the last count we had? I think there's something like 5 million attorneys in the US, something like that. And all of them to some degree have this issue. How many marketing agencies do you think there are that realistically can create referrals between each other? Hundreds, maybe thousands. It's not the same. You don't have the same value add because it's much easier to manually create these connections for agencies as opposed to trying to create big lists, whittle them down, run large sequences, which make more sense, I think, for folks that are like widely dispersed.
Mm. Is this something that which works better with the medium and smaller size firms? Like, do the larger firms tend to be more holistic in the law areas that they cover?
Depends. Like that is definitely true for firms that specialize in things like family law, criminal defense. I think the bigger you are, the more likely it is you branch into other practices. Less true for personal injury, which tends to always have hyper focus on personal injury. That being said, I don't think whether it's successful or not is as much a function of the size as it is the practice area. So there are some firms which just lend themselves really well to complementary relationships. An example, workers' comp firms and PI firms. In general, folks who get the reason why that is such a great relationship is because most people who get hurt at work don't know if they need a workers' comp lawyer or a PI lawyer. They just know they were hurt at work. So it is very natural for that person to come to PI, and because it was a work injury, it's not a PI issue matter, it's a workers' comp issue, so they need to be referred. And it's also pretty common that a PI like person, which it's less common because workers' comp laws do tend to dictate that if you're injured at work, you're going to have a workers' comp claim, not a PI claim. But there are scenarios, though the minority, where there's a personal injury matter that comes out of that injury at work because let's say the person was like driving for their job and so now it's a personal injury matter if they got into an accident while they were driving for their job. I think there's a couple of other states where there's laws around like if you were using like a third party contractor and you were hurt while working under them, there are scenarios where it can transition into a personal injury matter and you'd be referred from the workers' comp lawyer to the personal injury lawyer. So for like firms like that have very natural and organic ties. And that's true for other practices too.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned about firms with no brand. You talked about this at the top of the show. Brand is obviously a key driving factor in the world that we live in with AI visibility, SEO, EAT factors, all of that good stuff. So what does brand actually mean in terms of legal, and where do you start if they just look like every other like lawyer in town, let's say? Like how do you start to build a brand as a lawyer?
Yeah. So everything you mentioned is transferable to law. Like that's not exclusive to other industries. Authority matters, EAT matters, like being visible in your community matters. So whether that's running sponsorships or speaking at events or being a member of your local bar, all of those things matter. From like a concrete kind of rubber meets the road standpoint, the way that we will typically start engagements where we see that a firm is lacking in differentiation and brand is usually by helping them out with what we would call like a brand Bible project. So what that is we help them distill their essence into a 35 to 40 page document, which is going to have kind of the things you'd imagine, like the standard things you'd imagine, like your color palette, font family, logo, usage guidelines. Those are things you will always see. But we also help them do some of the more intangible, like refine some of the more intangible aspects of their brand, like their mission statement, their brand pillars, their promise to clients, slogans and taglines, their voice. And all of these things combined are what makes a brand a brand. So we kind of come into it with that that mindset that we want to look at where they are, what their competitors look like, and how can we carve out a space for them in their market.
It's a fascinating area, and it's so important. It's something we've neglected. I was at a conference in Ibiza last year, and they had the owner of Copy or Die, I think it's called. Great copywriter, did a presentation, and yeah, I mean, even just producing small pieces of copy for ad creatives should stem from this like predefined brand guidelines, company ethos, all of this stuff that which just makes such a difference. And then when you see large brands doing this right, the way that they present themselves on social, or the way that they'll like comment on in the UK here, we have a big rivalry between a couple of supermarkets and this like Christmas cake that they release. One is like one of the big 5 supermarkets, the other's like one of the cheaper Aldi ones, and they're battling it out over social. It's like really funny, but it's so cool to see that they're so on top of the way that they want to be seen to their customers.
Right. Well, here's the question I have for you with it. How do you feel about taking all of these aspects of a brand that I've mentioned, and it sounds like you agree are important, slogans and taglines, voice, pillar, promise, mission, feeding that as context into AI and saying, spit me out ad creatives? Do you think that is sufficient? Or do you think you still need the human there?
The guy that gave the talk would punch us in the face if we said that was a good thing to do. He said it is not a good thing to do. He can't do it.
What do you think?
I agree. I use AI to like help with stuff, but the anything that I want to write that's meaningful, an AI can't do it. Is my opinion, in terms of like if I want it to be good. It's like if you want it to be fast or really, really good. Like if I'm going to write a best man speech for my brother's wedding, I'm not going to use AI. I'm going to write every single word. If I'm doing a best man speech for someone I don't really like and I don't really want to go to his wedding, although I can't imagine why that situation would arise.
That reminds me of that. What's that famous thing they say about contractors? You could be fast, cheap, or good, and you can only pick 2.
That's
right?
it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you think then? You agree?
I don't agree.
Okay.
I think, okay, let me get caveated. I think it can be done with enough context engineering, and getting that right is very hard, and most people will get it wrong and it will look like trash. And I think the further we go, like the longer we go, the less sensitive it will be to that context engineering, and the easier it'll be to make it not look like slop.
I mean, I do use AI like vigorously in our company, and I'm getting more and more obsessed with it and more ingrained with it, with the stuff that it can do. I think if you're talking about producing a 35 to 40 page brand Bible, the amount of context that you can give like an AI system, it can do so much of the heavy lifting for you. I think I was more talking about like maybe if I was having to email reply a very important client, or maybe if I was paying a lot of money for a Facebook ad creative and it needed to be like a tagline on the ad, I'm not just going to even communicating with my 35 to 40 page brand document inside of like a custom GPT and say, give me 5 examples. I'm not just going to pick one. I'd probably give it more time. So I think it depends on where it's going. But I'd say for 95% of the stuff, but you've got to get that brand Bible right, haven't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think we wouldn't just a la carte put it into AI either and say, okay, it's in, here's the output, let's use it. But we would set up an N8N workflow, have like our brand Bible as context, ask it to generate 30 creatives, and then have us prompt for feedback and use those assets.
Yeah. But that's where, yeah.
So I think we are just getting closer and closer to the convergence of where we need less and less humans in the middle, which is not a very, I don't think that's a very inflammatory statement.
No, I agree. But I think the hard work is in that initial thing which you said. Like there'll be a lot of brands that just don't have that, have never even thought about it or considered it in terms of like, what should our ethos be? What should our taglines be? How should we be talking to customers?
Even worse, I think a lot of firms are thinking we can use AI to generate those.
Come up with that. Yeah. And that's...
and then it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. On the offline side, how are you using things like events, scholarships, alumni links, and similar plays to build brand and authority, the feedback into search?
In the same way you probably do, and really anybody who's has expertise in this subject would. We understand that not all links are created equal, like having links that are relevant, having links that are authoritative, having links that are recent. All of these matter. So we help firms who we don't believe it just makes sense to, continue building directory links or, chopping off that low hanging fruit. At some point, you've got to look beyond that and figure out how can we get those links that our competitors don't have, right? And a lot of times that's doing the things that competitors aren't willing to do. And just an easy example of that is like those local events, or many of many alumni associations have opportunities for you, if you're a lawyer, to get involved and then get a backlink. So you can do things like go on their podcast. A lot of alumni associations have podcasts, or you can contribute to a regular publication. Whatever it is, there's usually some vector to get in, but it takes an outsized amount of time relative to just pushing out a bunch of links.
And I think the compounding effect of these sorts of activities go far above and beyond that of just the inherent sort of algorithmic SEO benefit which you're trying to achieve. It's more than that. It's feeding more stuff into the knowledge graph, isn't it? It's making those points of connections with relevant entities. And so it's just such a better thing to do.
Yeah, and you're creating real value on those sites beyond just a link insertion where it's stuffing a backlink to my site into a context which may or may not make a ton of sense. Instead, you might have, if it's a podcast, they might do a written transcript that's, got megabytes of data on that page talking all about you, all about your company, all about what you do and how you help people. And it's living on their site and pointing to you. So when you talk about backlinks being a voucher for authority, what's a better voucher than a site taking up significant bandwidth for your content?
Yeah. What about, so I'm not really a big user of TikTok, but my wife's on it all the time. So I have recently like doom scrolled a bit, and I do occasionally come across, there's maybe 3 or 4. I've probably stayed on their videos long enough that the algorithm now like shows me the same 3 or 4 sort of personal injury lawyers, maybe a couple of personal injury, maybe a couple of criminal defense. And they're doing some like really interesting sort of screen stopping content. So I'm intrigued. Is that a strategy that works? And is that a great time to do it if you've got the balls to get up and do it? A lot of lawyers, I imagine, A, don't want to, and B, just haven't got the time. Like, can you speak to that?
Are you, as a sidebar to that, are you getting UK lawyers?
No.
You're getting US lawyers.
But the ones I stopped on were US. So I do get one UK lawyer, but yeah, it works slightly differently though in the UK, I think, in terms of...
Do you remember any of the lawyers you're getting?
Oh, not by name, no.
Okay. Yeah, I'll answer that in 2 parts. Can it work? Yes. Would I recommend it? For most people, no. Like, you need to have a very specific... You have to be willing to do it. And most firms... And you have to be willing to do it to an extreme. You can't just, like, dip your toe into that. You've got to, like, get ready to do some outrageous things and do them consistently. So for us, and I know that this is not, this is our ethos on it. This is not the ethos on it. Our ethos on this is we want your social media. We never want your social media to deter somebody from signing up with you.
Right.
So for us, we want your social media to look on brand. We want some level of consistent posting, but usually it's evergreen content. It's going to be things like testimonials from clients, big firm news, things like that. And we don't, that is like the extent of kind of where we believe social media should live on legal. That being said, we also recognize that there are like extremes to this, and there are strategies that work. And I will say, like, I'm talking specifically about organic social. Paid social is a different animal altogether. We absolutely believe in running paid lead ad campaigns and running forms of paid social. I'm speaking specifically about organic posting. The other point to note, if you're thinking about going down that particular rabbit hole, is we work with a firm right now who said, the founder said something pretty apt to us maybe a week or 2 ago. He said, I'll never post anything I'm not ready to be deposed on. So like, understand that if you put it out there, and lawyers understand this better than anybody, but for some reason, I don't know that they're always thinking about it. Get ready to defend it. Like, if you have to.
It sounds like you're saying, when you said like to get ready to do some outrageous things consistently, it sounds like the cost of sort of an explosive social profile, like let's say an amazing amount of followers on TikTok and potentially some great referrals as well, is that you will immediately isolate certain potential customers based on what's out there.
Probably true. Probably true. I think the bigger consideration, though, is just opportunity cost. Where could that time be spent otherwise?
Yeah.
For most firms, you're not going to become TikTok famous.
Yeah. Okay. I just picture like some hotshot lawyer just spending all of his time on TikTok and like forgetting to do his cases.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like the only like upshot to all of that in my mind is if you're an established brand and you've got an extremely memorable profile, like there's this guy out of Texas, Jim Adler, the Hammer, and his whole thing is he jumps off trucks with a big hammer. So like if you're that guy and you're known for that already and you're running TV and you've been running TV for 20 years or whatever, and you're one of the biggest firms in the state, it's probably pretty natural to expand that profile into social and just increase your reach. I'm not speaking though to that person.
Okay. Where does digital PR fit in then? I suppose that's just an extension of what we talked about before, isn't it? The sort of those links which make sense. Does that? I mean, we've worked together briefly with the digital PR campaign. Is it something that you think lawyers are interested in being mentioned in tier 1 media?
Definitely. It goes back to opportunity cost. Is that the best use of the spend, or is better use of spend either low cost or free local links that are highly relevant? So it largely depends on objectives and budget.
Okay. Right. Let's talk a bit about AI SEO then. Actually, I don't know. We had a brief chat before we recorded this. I think if you remember mentioning LLMS.txt. Have you seen the drama on Twitter today?
I have not. I'm actually not a big Twitter user.
Okay, so Google created their own LLMS.txt on their portal thing. John Mueller was like, "We don't need it. You don't need it. Nobody needs. Google doesn't read it. The AIs aren't going to read it. No one reads it." Then all of a sudden, I think it was John Mueller had been called out saying, like, we've noticed this LLMS.txt that Google's uploaded on its portal, and about 3 hours later they've removed it. So
unbelievable. Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's the worst.
Yeah. Okay, so when it comes to AI SEO, how are you thinking about tactics like LLMS? So hard to say.
LLMs.
LLMS text.
Oh, you say yeah.
Listicle inclusions. Like, where does the AI SEO strategy differ, or is similar to the traditional SEO strategy?
Yeah. Well, I'll caveat this by saying anybody who gives an authoritative answer on this is probably lying because nobody really
Good
knows.
answer. Yeah.
But that being said, I do have opinions that I feel make logical sense. The first opinion is, in general, the things that you're going to do for SEO will work for AEO. So having content that's readable is going to help your SEO and your AEO. Having content that gets to the point quickly without too much fluff is going to be helpful for both. It's just easier to understand what you are trying to show if you directly say, here's the question, here's the answer, as opposed to here's the question, here's a bunch of preamble, and then here's the answer. So that's one. The second is, it makes sense to me that the LLMs, who are 20 years behind Google when it comes to parsing the web, understanding the web, and like creating meaning between documents, which is not the same as creating meaning within a document or creating like a semantic understanding of sentence structure and kind of like human language, which they excel at. So understanding like that knowledge graph, they are nascent. So anything you can do that will improve their understanding, they should and will reward, right? So things like schema.org. Schema.org is another one of those, like there's a lot of discussion around how impactful schema.org was for SEO. I believe schema.org has outsized impact on AEO because you are giving explicit information to the answer engines around relationships between entities. So it makes it very easy for them to understand, how does this relate to another document, to itself? Like what are we actually representing here? And you're not limited by like wanting to show rich results. So like the set of schema.org that was relevant for SEO was pretty limited, right? It only really mattered if you wanted to get a rich result in the SERP. For AEO, you're not capped by that. So you can have like that full set of schema that might be relevant in your documents. And then, there's the stuff that I think is even more gray. Like, you have people saying it outperforms when you have bullet lists for answer engines versus like SEO. Like it is just higher impact on answer engines than it is for search engines. Having bulleted lists and your content bullet lists, things like having FAQ markup. People are saying that specifically has outsized impact on AEO. Having things like quick digests, so like a quick recap of each section as you go. People are saying that is impactful for answer engines versus SEO. And that may or may not be true. All of this may or may not be true, but I think there's less rationale to it as opposed to some of the things that, it makes sense to me that the engines would reward behavior that feeds their system, which makes them better.
I think that's a safe bet to assume. I also think that was a good answer to say. Anyone that says they know, like they know, then they don't know, because we can't even track this stuff yet. But I'm really deep into sort of this knowledge entity connection thing at the minute. I think Google is going to be moving away from like page rank and link equity and more towards this like entity strength, and really that just boils down to sort of building brand and authority, but also making sure that you understand entities and how they're connected. So I think that's...
something on that note, I was just reading an article, I don't remember where, about NavBoost and Glue, which are systems Google uses to understand user behavior on sites. Specifically, Glue relates to, like, as I understand it, Glue is more related to like highly topical, kind of quick, recent news and determining whether content appears in the Discover feed, whereas NavBoost is more general and relates to things like pogo sticking behavior and dwell time and stuff like that. Do you feel like Google will lean into those user signals as, of course they already do this, like your rank is largely dependent on user behavior on your site, but will they lean in even further on those signals and increase the effect, because that is where they have by far more data than the answer engines, right? Answer engines don't have, ChatGPT did just release a browser, but most of them have no real browser adoption, so they can't understand user behavior at the browser level. They don't have their own operating systems, so they can't understand user behavior at the system level. And Google has decades of that historical data. So do you feel like they're going to lean in on the user signals?
Since the leak last year, which clearly showed that they were relying on user signals more than they like publicly said that they were. Then we had Perplexity try and make a ludicrous offer to buy Chrome when that court case was going. Yeah, I agree. I think Google is sitting on so much more like granular and actionable data, and they're also profitable. Like ChatGPT is just hemorrhaging money.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's all to play for, but I just would not rule Google out of the competition at all.
Well, me neither. And did you see, I think it was yesterday, ChatGPT declared code red with Google. What did Google release? I think with just improvements in Google's AI in Gemini, actually. But ChatGPT just announced a code red.
Which means what?
I'm assuming it means problem for the business. Google announced a code red or code orange or something back when ChatGPT was first resurging.
Like an internal sort of announcement. Okay. That's interesting. Because Gemini 3 is really good.
I've heard Nano Banana is crazy too. I haven't played with it too much yet.
Yeah, play with that. Take an internal document, a piece of information that would lend itself well to an infographic. Here's a good prompt for you. Ask it to create like a whiteboard effect using like colors, bubbles, and arrows. Upload the document, and it will spit out something you a year ago would have paid a designer to do. It's
really
incredible.
Oh, sick. Yeah, okay.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
okay, Bobby, look, we haven't got long left. I do want to touch on one more thing before we finish. You mentioned that there has been an influx, or there is an influx of private equity money and consolidation in the legal industry right now. What does that mean? What does that look like? What should firms be thinking? Tell me about it.
Yeah, it depends on your practice. If you're a criminal defense lawyer, if you're an immigration lawyer, if you're a family lawyer, it's probably not going to impact you too much because you're not running billboards, you're not running TV, you're just not playing in the same space. So for personal injury firms, this is highly impactful for a bunch of reasons. One reason on the plus side, potentially, is you have more opportunities for an exit. Like if you are a smaller firm that's seen significant growth and you've got a strong brand or you've got some like key differentiator or key strategic opportunity, you might be a good target for acquisition and you can expect a higher multiple than you probably would have prior to all this money coming in. So that's one kind of interesting side effect. I think for other firms, it's not going to be positive. It's going to mean there's more money, more competition in your space. Firms are going to for firms to meet the demands of outside money, they're going to need to expand quickly, which means bigger firms moving into smaller markets and bigger markets. It's just more firms that were previously regional players. So they might have been state dominators or city dominators now needing to think one level up, right? So the city dominator now needs to think at the state level. The state dominator now needs to think at the multi-state level to allocate and meet the demands of these private equity investment. So that's, I think, probably scary for a lot of the smaller firms who aren't taking this outside capital. And then I think it's going to lend itself to, I am concerned that there's always been an undercurrent of like less than savory means to acquire leads in legal. It's no secret that lead gen providers in legal are shady, and a lot of the practices to acquire leads are shady. Like I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before. When outside money comes in and there's demands to see returns, it means that you need to generate more cases than you were before. And if everyone's doing this, then your traditional channels are going to get crowded out. I mean, if PPC was a bloodbath before and it's a Dutch auction, imagine what it's going to be now when you've got 5 more big players in your market, all spending and all raising the prices of those clicks. So when that becomes untenable, you've got to turn somewhere else to get those leads. Lead gens are a natural answer, but that can be problematic. So I see that happening too. I think more than ever, it really just means get ahead of the problem and start carving out your brand, create some visibility, recognizability, and don't wait until after the money's moved in.
Or just take the exit if it's a great multiple.
Or take the exit.
You want to retire anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Or take the exit.
Yeah. Okay, Bobby, this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this chat. If people want to find you or hunt you down, I'm sure they'll remember the name Mean Pug, but where can they go?
Yeah, you can go to meanpug.com or send us an email at bark@meanpug.com. We also just got a vanity number, which I'm not sure if it's done transferring, but you could try calling 833 Mean Pug. That's 833 Mean Pug, and hopefully someone answers.
That's great. That's brilliant. Bobby, thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.